My name's Wild Willie, as you might have heard, and I have a YouTube channel where I review books and interview authors. And today I'm interviewing actually Vikki VanSickle. So if you'd like to maybe introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Vikki VanSickle. I'm so excited to be here virtually at Read by the Sea. I'm the author of a number of books, including the picture books If I Had a Griffin, and this is a rhyming book about magical pet care. Teddy Bear of the Year, and this is about a teddy bear's picnic that happens in the woods. It's a little bit magical, and there's a really nice service awards there where the teddy bears get awards for doing small acts of kindness. And then my third picture book, and the one we're going to talk about the most today, is Anonymous. Now, the title Anonymous is based on a word anonymous, and you might know that that word means anonymous is a person who we don't know, so their name is a mystery or their identity is a mystery. And anonymous is a hint that maybe the person in the book is not a person at all, but a kind of animal. And I'm sure you can tell by that title, Anonymous, what kind of animal it might be. So Anonymous is about a street artist who leaves art in the city for the animals to find. And I grew up in a small town, and when I moved to Toronto, where I am now, I really loved all the murals and art that I saw in the city, and that was an inspiration for the book. So I'm very sad that I can't be with you for Read by the Sea, but one of the things I can do is take you to see some of the spots in my own neighborhood that were inspiring to me. So I'm going to take you on a little tour of some spots in Toronto that inspired some things about Anonymous. But the other thing I wanted to point out is when you are going for a walk, why don't you try looking for things a little differently? So instead of just going for a walk for exercise or to get fresh air, see if you could notice something different or interesting or artistic or inspiring. And I'm going to show you what I mean when I take you on a pandemic walk with myself in Toronto. So get ready, and we're going to take off to see the things the way that Anonymous might see them. So one of the things I like to do when I go for walks is check out the gardens, because in addition to flowers, you might be able to find something else, like a magical little creature. Shh, I think he's sleeping. The other thing I really love is graffiti and painted murals. And sometimes on my walks, if I go in through alleyways or down a street I've never been, I find surprises like this. Now the biggest surprise was not just this painting, but when I turned the corner, I saw that it was actually a whole series of paintings. Pretty mysterious, right? So this is one of my favorites because it's a peace sign made of flowers, which are two things that I love. I love the message of it. I love that it's in this urban space, but it's really whimsical and beautiful. What could you do to make your space whimsical and beautiful? Not all murals are made of color. Some of them can be black and white and really simple, but still tell a story or have an impact. What do you think is on that music cassette tape? And for those of you who are too young to know what a cassette tape is, what would be on your ideal Spotify list? The other thing I love about all of my neighborhood walks have been the amazing sidewalk artists. Take a look at this rainbow. So one of the other things I like to look for are painted rocks. You can see some of them right here. I have made a smiley face and one that says hope. And instead of an O, there's a daisy, because I think flowers are hopeful. So these are things you can make on your own and leave either in your own front yard or in a park, somewhere for people to find. So some street art or signage can teach you a bit about the people in the world, social justice, and important issues, like this sign right here. And also, when you're on your walks, don't forget to look up. So I hope you enjoyed some of the sights and sounds of Toronto and the things that you might see if you're going through your own neighborhood, and maybe you got some ideas of things for you to do as well. So what I'd like to do now is share with you the story, Anonymous. So this is written by Vikki VanSickle, that's me, and illustrated by Anna Paroli. Anna lives in Italy, we've never met, and she did an amazing job with the art, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. It's very important when you're reading a picture book that you look at all the illustrations very carefully, because you might miss something if you don't. And that's very true in this book. Anonymous. Words by Vikki VanSickle. Pictures by Anna Paroli. One morning, a tired city rat made her way home. But when she got there, she found it had been transformed. Across the city, a colony of bats was settling in for a good day's sleep when they noticed something unusual. Very unusual. There's no explanation, only a name. Anonymous. Suddenly, Anonymous's art was everywhere. No canvas was too high. Or too low. Or too unusual. Sometimes it was funny. Sometimes it was serious. But it always made the animals of the city think. Time went by, the art faded, became obscured, or disappeared completely. There hadn't been anything new from Anonymous in a long time. The animals of the city missed Anonymous's perspective. They worried that something bad had happened. After all, the city can be dangerous for animals. More time went by with no sign of Anonymous. But the art left a lasting impression on the animals of the city. Thanks to Anonymous, they looked at the city in a whole new way. As for Anonymous, the world is his canvas. There's his tag. And there he is, disappearing off the page. So that is the story of Anonymous. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I'm so glad to be here at Read by the Sea. I can't wait to see the art and the things you do in your own community to be your own Anonymous. And I'm also really excited to answer your questions. Hi, I'm so excited to be here with you virtually, of course. My name is Vikki VanSickle. I'm so excited to be here at Read by the Sea. I'm purely in my own backyard, but I can't wait to chat with you, Willie. This will be fun.
Yeah. So, basically, when did you start writing?
So I started writing, the thing that I remember the most is when I was in the summer between grade 3 and grade 4, I wrote a book called The Loon, and it was based on an experience I had where I was up north, I was at a cottage, and I saw loons for the first time, and I found them quite magical, so I wanted to write a story about that. But even before I wrote that book down, I've always had stories in my head. I always like to tell people stories. If things happen to friends of mine, I love to pass them on. I've just always been interested in people and stories, and it's always been a big part of my life. But that grade 3 story was the one that I think really made me feel like it was something that I could do.
So, when you were like growing up, did you always like writing, or did it kind of just start when you were writing your grade 3 book?
I think I've always liked it, mostly because I've always liked stories. And when I figured out that it was something that I could do, because I knew that I loved reading books, but it never occurred to me that people wrote those books. I had never met an author before. I didn't really understand the concept of that. And that sort of, again, in grade 3 was when I really thought, well, maybe I could be the person who does that. And I've written ever since.
So, when you were growing up, did you always like reading, or was it something you kind of picked up on while, like, maybe from your parents or something?
I've always loved to read. My mom loves to read as well. She is now a retired high school librarian, so there were always books in the house. But it was definitely something that I think of the people in my family, I was the one that loved to read the most. And I started to read relatively young. I don't actually remember a time where I couldn't read, so I've always been in love with books and reading all kinds of different things all the time.
So, when you started writing books for, like, your audience, I guess, did you kind of have an idea of what you wanted your first book to be, or did you kind of just go on the fly with your first book?
That's a really great question. So I am an ideas person. I have a lot of ideas all of the time, and I keep a journal where I write them down. And for me, the hardest part is actually finding an idea to stick to. And the way that I know that a book is what I really want to write is if I can't stop thinking about that idea in particular. And I eventually move from sort of the brainstorming phase where I'm just writing ideas in my journal to trying out the story in the voice of the character. So my first book that was published was Words That Start with B, and I actually thought that maybe it was a play. My background is in theater, and I wanted to write a play, and so I was working on this, and that book has a lot of dialogue in it, and that's because in my head I thought I was writing a play, and plays are all about dialogue. And it wasn't until I really got into the story that I realized it wasn't a play at all, it was going to be a book, and that sort of changed the way that I looked at it a little bit. But I often tell myself my next book is going to be something, and then I start working on it, and then I change my mind. So I've learned to really sort of follow my gut or follow my heart. I abandon things all the time. Sometimes I come back to them, sometimes I don't, but I really like to be in the mood and in the head of that story, and if it's not working for me, then I try something else.
So, is there any, like, books or one of your books that you've really liked to written, or do you kind of like to write all of them?
Sure, that's a great question. And one of the things that's been interesting for me is I've written a number of books now, and everyone has been a little bit different. I thought after I wrote a novel that every novel I wrote would feel the same, but that hasn't been true. In terms of books that were really fun and sort of the easiest for me to write, Anonymous, which is my most recent picture book, that one came together really quickly for me. Normally I do a lot of different drafts, I change a lot of things, but for whatever reason this was a very magical experience, and so it came together quite quickly, and then the illustrator did an amazing job. I felt like she saw right into my brain in terms of how I wanted it to look. So that was a really interesting experience. One of the more challenging experiences for me was The Winnowing, and that's my most recent novel. And what was difficult for this for me is I don't really like to outline. So I don't plan from the beginning. I don't like to plot from the beginning. I like to sort of fly by the seat of my pants. But because this book was science fiction and I had to think of all these different things like the timeline, like history, I had to make up history for this book. It had to do a lot of pre-planning. And at first it was really fun, it was really exciting, but then I got sort of stuck in it because it's not normally the way I write. So even though it was a challenge and it was very different, I really liked it in the end, and I learned a lot about my own process, and I learned that I can do both things. I can fly by the seat of my pants, or I can sit and plot for a while. And that was really valuable for me to learn as an author.
So, a lot of fans of your writing, I'm sure, want to know if you have any more books coming out in the future, or if you have any plans to continue writing more books.
Yes, I do. So I have 2 books that are coming out somewhat soonish. So I have a picture book coming out next year, and it's called Into the Goblin Market, and it's sort of a spooky Halloweenish picture book. I love Halloween, it's one of my favorite seasons, and it's based on a poem, an old poem by Christina Rossetti called Goblin Market, and it's about 2 sisters who go to this market. One of them is captured and the other one has to rescue her. And so I sort of took that idea and wrote a sequel, and it was really fun to do. I wrote in rhyme again. I've written in rhyme for If I Had a Griffin, and so it was fun to go back to that. So that will be next next year. And then I have a novel with Scholastic that's coming. There's no date yet. It's all very new and exciting. And this is actually, I guess this is sort of a sneak peek. It's the first time I've talked about it. Right now it's called P.S. Tell No One. And it's about a secret diary that 4 kids are passing around in a class, and they write in code. And it's sort of about this year for them. They've had their cell phones taken away, and they're discussing the things that are happening in class. That was really fun to do because they got to go back to dialogue again. I've never written in a diary style before, and that was really fun. So that will be my next novel, and that one doesn't have a date yet, but it'll probably be within the next 2 years.
So do you have any maybe like tips or advice to people that are trying to become authors that maybe like your style, for example?
Sure. So I would say my 3 biggest tips are: number 1, read as much as you can and read everything. So read comics, read things on the internet, read magazine articles, read nonfiction, read fiction. The more that you read, the better your sense of language and story and possibility is. It's sort of like when people tell you to eat vegetables and they say you are what you eat. They want you to eat vegetables because they're good for you. I feel that way about books. So you are what you read. So read as much as you can. That's the easiest one. The second one is to keep a journal or a diary or some sort of writing book. And that's where you can write down ideas that you have, names that you like, books that you really enjoy. It's just a great place to have and sort of start, and also to sort of make it a habit. So maybe every day you write something in your journal. It doesn't have to be from a story that you're working on, but at least you're taking time out every day to form that writing habit. And my third piece of advice is to find a writing buddy. It's good to have a person you can bounce ideas off of. So much of writing is being alone and being in your own room or your own head just writing, but knowing that someone is going to read it and they're going to give you feedback is really helpful. I have a reading and writing buddy, and she lives in Vancouver, so we live far apart. But we send each other stuff somewhat regularly, and it's great for me because whenever I get feedback, I get energized to keep going, and I do the same thing for her. So again, read as much as you can, start a writing habit with a journal every day, or a little bit a day, it doesn't have to be a lot, and then find that writing buddy who can help you on your writing journey.
So yeah, thank you so much for your time, and yeah.
Great, my pleasure. It was so nice to meet you.